The first thing Mark remembered was the cold. A deep, gnawing chill that settled into his bones like frost creeping over a window pane. Then came the hunger, sharp, relentless, gnashing at his insides like a wild animal trapped in his gut. He didn't know how long he had been lying there, half buried in damp earth, before his fingers twitched, clawing at the dirt. His body moved before his mind could catch up. Muscles, stiff and uncooperative, jerked him upright. His vision swam, the world a blur of grays and greens. The scent of something warm, something alive, hit him like a punch to the face. Saliva pooled in his mouth, thick and metallic. He didn't question it. He didn't wonder why his skin was gray, why his clothes were torn and caked in filth, why his chest no longer rose and fell with breath. He only knew he had to feed. The early stages were the worst. The hunger was all-consuming, a fire in his veins that drowned out everything else. Mark stumbled through the woods, his gait unsteady, his limbs refusing to move the way they once had. He didn't remember his name at first, didn't remember the life before. There were only flashes, a woman's face, a child's laughter, the smell of coffee, but they slipped away like smoke whenever he tried to grasp them. The first human he encountered was a hunter, a man in camouflage with a rifle slung over his shoulder. The scent of blood and sweat made Mark's jaw ache. He lunged before the man could react, teeth sinking into flesh. The taste was electric, warmth flooding his deadened senses. The hunter screamed, thrashing, but Mark held on, tearing, swallowing, consuming. When it was over, the hunger dulled, just for a little while. Weeks passed, or maybe months. Time didn't mean much anymore. Mark wandered, driven by instinct, joining the shambling masses of the undead when their paths crossed. They didn't speak. They didn't plan. They just were. But something was changing. The hunger wasn't as sharp. His movements became smoother, less erratic. And then, one day, he remembered. His name was Mark Reynolds. He had been a teacher. He had a wife, Jenny. The memory hit him like a bullet. He staggered, clutching his head as images flooded back. Jenny's smile, her hands brushing his cheek, the way she laughed when he told stupid jokes. Their daughter, Emily, with her wild curls and bright eyes. They were gone. The realization was a knife twisting in his chest. He had been dead. He was dead. And yet here he was walking, thinking, feeling. Not all zombies came back the same. Some stayed mindless, forever trapped in that primal state of hunger and violence. Others woke up. Mark wasn't the only one. He started noticing others like him, zombies who moved with purpose, whose eyes held a flicker of awareness. They didn't speak, not at first, but they recognized each other. The world had changed while he was gone. Cities were ruins. Survivors hid behind walls, armed and ruthless. The living feared the dead, but they feared the aware dead even more. Mark avoided them when he could. He didn't want to hurt people anymore. The hunger was still there, gnawing at him, but he fought it. He scavenged instead, rotting meat, animals, anything to keep the craving at bay. Years passed. His body decayed, but slowly, far slower than it should have. His skin was leathery, stretched tight over bones. His hair fell out in patches. But his mind was clear. He found others like him. They formed a ragged community, hiding in the ruins of an old town. They couldn't speak. Their vocal cords were too far gone. But they communicated in other ways. Gestures, writing, the occasional grunt or groan. They weren't alive. But they weren't just monsters either. Mark often wondered if this was all there was. An endless half-existence, caught between life and death. And then one day he felt it, a slowing, fading. His movements became sluggish. His thoughts, once sharp, grew muddled. The hunger vanished entirely, replaced by a hollow emptiness. He sat against a crumbling wall, staring at the sunset, and for the first time in years he felt peace. The last thing he saw was Emily's face, smiling at him. Then, nothing. The corpse that had once been Mark Reynolds didn't move again. The last embers of whatever force had reanimated him flickered out. His body remained, slumped and still, as nature began to reclaim him. Insects crawled over his skin. Birds pecked at dried flesh. Rain and wind eroded what was left. And somewhere, in the dirt and the decay, the cycle waited to begin again.